Your Honor, jail was the best thing that ever happened to my son. The words hang in the air longer than anyone expects them to. For a split second, the courtroom forgets how to breathe. A low murmur ripples through the audience, not loud enough to be disrespectful, but sharp enough to signal disbelief. Heads turn. A few people lean forward in their seats. This isn't confusion, it's shock. Parents don't say things like that. Not out loud. Not about their own children. Judge Judy freezes mid-motion. One eyebrow lifts slowly, not in anger, not in sympathy, but in something far more dangerous: focused curiosity. In all her years on the bench, she's heard excuses, lies, tears, and even outright hatred between family members. But this is different. This is a father calmly declaring that incarceration improved his child's life. No parent had ever said those words in her courtroom before. Across the room, the son stiffens. His confident posture falters just enough to notice. His jaw tightens. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't laugh it off, doesn't roll his eyes like he did moments earlier. For the first time since walking in, he looks unsure, not of the judge but of what his father might say next. Because everyone can feel it now. That sentence wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was a door opening. And whatever is behind it isn't flattering. What this father is about to reveal will completely dismantle the image his son carefully constructed in front of the court. The responsible young man. The misunderstood victim. The one who claims he just needs one more chance. In the next few minutes, that story is going to collapse, piece by piece, and when it does, the entire courtroom will be forced to see this case through a very different lens. If you've ever wondered how far a parent would go to save their child, or when love finally means stopping protection altogether, stay with me. What comes next changes everything. The case on paper looks painfully ordinary. A small claims dispute filed on a weekday afternoon, the kind Judge Judy has seen thousands of times before. A son suing his own father over money. No allegations of violence. No explosive charges. Just numbers, dates, and a family disagreement that appears to have gone too far. The bailiff calls the case, the parties step forward, and for a moment, nothing about it feels unusual. The son stands at the plaintiff's podium, shoulders back, arms crossed with casual confidence. He's well-dressed, clean jacket, crisp shirt, polished shoes. Not flashy but intentional. The kind of outfit that quietly says, "I have my life together." There's a faint smirk on his face, the expression of someone who believes this case is already decided. He glances toward his father not with anger, but with impatience, as if he's tired of explaining something obvious to someone who just doesn't get it. His claim is simple. He says his father owes him money. An unpaid loan. Bail money that was promised to be returned. Damage to property that was never taken seriously. The details blur together into a familiar narrative. I helped him. He let me down. Now I'm here to make it right. He speaks clearly, confidently, with the practiced ease of someone used to defending himself. Every sentence sounds reasonable. Every grievance sounds justified. Across the courtroom, the father couldn't look more different. He's older, dressed modestly, his clothes neat but worn in the way that suggests practicality over image. His shoulders slope forward slightly, not from weakness but from exhaustion. He stands quietly, hands resting on the edge of the podium, eyes fixed downward unless addressed directly. When he does look up, it's brief, careful, as if he's weighing every word before allowing it to leave his mouth. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't argue. He doesn't react when his son speaks. If anything, he looks like a man bracing himself, not for judgment but for something he's already accepted. From the bench, Judge Judy listens with measured patience. At first, her expression is neutral, almost bored. This is familiar territory. Parents and children fighting over money. One claiming betrayal, the other claiming boundaries. She's seen it play out the same way countless times. A loan that was never written down. Expectations that were never clear. Hurt feelings disguised as legal claims. Her initial assumption is obvious. This is another family money dispute that never should have made it to court. A son who feels wronged. A father who probably mishandled expectations. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unprecedented. And at this stage, the optics seem to support that conclusion. The son looks composed. Reasonable. Wronged. He speaks as though he's the responsible one in the room, the adult forced to take legal action because his own father wouldn't do the right thing. The father, by contrast, appears hesitant, almost uncomfortable being there at all. He answers questions slowly, carefully, sometimes pausing as if choosing silence over self-defense. For the viewer, the conclusion feels obvious. The son seems like the victim. The father looks weak. Maybe irresponsible. Maybe stubborn. Maybe another parent who failed to hold up their end of the deal and now resents being called out for it. Nothing about this case, at least on the surface, suggests it's about anything more than money. And that's exactly what makes what's coming next so dangerous, because the courtroom is about to learn that this case was never really about dollars at all. When it's his turn to speak uninterrupted, the son settles into the moment like he's been waiting for it. His voice is steady, controlled, almost rehearsed. He doesn't sound angry. He sounds reasonable. That, more than anything else, is what makes him dangerous. He looks toward the bench and explains that he's not here out of spite. He's here because he's finally doing things the right way. "I've turned my life around," he says, nodding slightly as if the statement itself should be enough proof. He talks about growth, about maturity, about learning from mistakes. The language is polished, filled with the kind of phrases people use when they want credit without scrutiny. He mentions work plans, future goals, and vague references to getting back on track, but never lingers long enough on specifics for anyone to question them. Then he pivots to his father. He claims abandonment, not loudly, not emotionally, but calmly, as if he's stating an inconvenient fact. He says his father stopped supporting him when he needed it most. That when things got hard, the help disappeared. He frames himself as someone who had to figure life out alone, weighed down by a bad childhood and a complete lack of guidance. According to him, the odds were stacked from the beginning, and everything that followed was a predictable consequence of that neglect. Every problem, every mistake, every consequence has a root cause, and that cause is never him. As he talks, small cracks begin to show. When his father is mentioned, his tone shifts just slightly, edging into impatience. He rolls his eyes once when the older man adjusts his stance. When a question doesn't go his way, he exhales sharply through his nose, a fleeting display of irritation he seems to forget the courtroom can see. At one point he corrects the judge. Not rudely, at least not outright, but confidently enough to suggest he believes his version of events deserves priority. It's subtle, almost polite, and yet it lands wrong. The kind of correction that doesn't challenge authority directly, but tests it. When the subject of jail comes up, his posture straightens. He's ready for this part. He dismisses it quickly, calling it a misunderstanding. Wrong place, wrong time. A situation that spiraled because of circumstances beyond his control. He insists it wasn't who he really is. Just a moment that got blown out of proportion. He emphasizes how brief it was, how exaggerated the consequences felt, how unfairly it painted him. To him, jail isn't a wake-up call, it's a footnote he'd rather everyone skip. Throughout it all, he keeps returning to the same theme. He tried. He changed. He reached out. And his father failed him. From the bench, the judge listens without interruption. Her face remains neutral, but something has shifted. She's no longer just hearing a story, she's watching behavior. She notices how easily responsibility slides off him. How blame always lands somewhere else. How his confidence never wavers, even when details remain conveniently vague. She asks a clarifying question, and his answer comes too quickly, too smoothly, as if he'd anticipated it. Another question, and he responds again, stacking explanation on top of explanation without ever slowing down. The courtroom grows quieter, not because it's bored, but because it's unsettled. There's nothing overtly explosive about what he's saying. No shouting. No insults. But something feels off. His story is airtight on the surface and hollow underneath. He sounds like someone who's learned how to speak accountability without ever actually accepting it. And as he finishes, leaning back slightly with his arms crossed once more, there's a growing sense in the room that this performance, carefully delivered, carefully controlled, is hiding something far less flattering just beneath it. The judge lets the son finish without comment. For a moment, she studies him in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she turns her attention away from the confident young man and toward the father who has barely spoken at all. The shift is subtle, but the room feels it. This is no longer about arguments or explanations. This is about truth. She asks a single question. Simple. Direct. "Sir," she says evenly, "why won't you help your son?" The father doesn't answer right away. He swallows. His hands tighten slightly against the podium. For the first time since the case began, he lifts his head fully. His eyes move briefly toward his son, then back to the judge. When he finally speaks, his voice isn't loud. It isn't angry. It's unsteady, weighted with something that sounds like years of restraint. "I've helped him," he says quietly. "More times than I can count." There's a pause. The kind that stretches just long enough to make people uncomfortable. A few members of the audience shift in their seats, expecting a justification, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation that fits the usual pattern. Instead, the father exhales slowly and continues. "But I won't help him anymore." The son's posture stiffens. His arms uncross. He opens his mouth as if to interrupt, then thinks better of it. The father's voice shakes now, not from fear but from effort. From holding something back for far too long. "Because," he says carefully, deliberately, "jail was the best time of his life." The words land heavier the second time. A ripple of gasps moves through the courtroom, louder and less restrained than before. Someone in the gallery audibly inhales. Another murmurs, "Did he really just say that?" The tension spikes instantly, sharp and electric. The son snaps his head toward his father, disbelief flashing across his face. "What?" he blurts out before he can stop himself. His earlier composure fractures, replaced by raw shock. This isn't the script he prepared for. This isn't the accusation he expected. The judge leans forward slightly in her chair. Not in outrage. Not in sympathy. In interest. Her eyes narrow just enough to signal that something important has surfaced. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't react emotionally. She simply waits, giving the father space, something the courtroom rarely does so deliberately. The father looks smaller now, not weaker but exposed. As if saying those words aloud cost him something he can't get back. He presses his lips together, steadying himself, aware that once this door is opened, there's no closing it again. The son shakes his head, already preparing a defense, his jaw tightening as anger creeps into his expression. The confidence he carried moments ago drains visibly, replaced by urgency. Control is slipping and he knows it. The courtroom has gone silent. Not the bored silence from earlier. Not the polite attention given to routine disputes. This is different. This is the stillness that comes when everyone realizes they're no longer watching a simple case unfold, but the beginning of a confession that's about to change everything. The father takes another breath, longer this time, as if steadying himself before stepping onto ground he's avoided for years. When he speaks again, his tone is calmer, not emotional, not defensive. It's measured, deliberate. This isn't a rant. It's an accounting. "Before jail," he says, eyes fixed forward, "my son didn't just make mistakes. He lived by lies." The words land quietly but they cut deep. He explains how money started going missing, small amounts at first. Cash from wallets. Items from the house that would later turn up pawned. Each time his son had an explanation. Each time it sounded just believable enough. When confronted, the lies came easily, layered on top of one another until truth became impossible to untangle. Then came the threats. Not physical, he clarifies, but emotional. Guilt. Manipulation. Anger. If his parents didn't help him, they were dead to him. If they questioned him, they were the reason his life was ruined. The father admits that fear crept in, not fear of harm but fear of losing his child entirely. Work never lasted. Jobs were quit or lost within weeks. Always someone else's fault. A bad boss. A toxic environment. An unfair system. Each time the parents stepped in again. Paid the tickets. Covered the fines. Fixed the messes quietly so no one else would know. Even lied to employers to protect their son's image when he didn't show up. "We thought we were helping," the father says softly. "But we were just making it easier for him to keep going." The son scoffs, shaking his head. He lets out a short laugh, sharp and dismissive. "That's not true," he says, interrupting. "You're exaggerating. You always do this." The judge raises a hand instantly. "Stop," she says without raising her voice. The interruption dies where it stands. She doesn't look at the son again. Not yet. Her attention shifts fully to the father, her body angled toward him now, signaling clearly who has the floor. "Continue," she says. The father nods, grateful, and continues without embellishment. He admits his own fault openly. No excuses. No deflection. "I protected him too long," he says. I covered for him when I shouldn't have. I believed him when I shouldn't have. And every time I stepped in, I thought I was being a good father. His voice tightens, but he doesn't stop. I wasn't. I was teaching him there were no consequences. The son mutters under his breath, clearly agitated now. His earlier confidence has vanished, replaced by irritation and disbelief. He shakes his head repeatedly, as if denying the reality being laid out in front of him might undo it. But the courtroom is listening closely. This isn't a parent attacking a child. It's a parent admitting failure and refusing to repeat it. And as the father finishes this part of his story, it becomes painfully clear that what he's describing isn't cruelty or abandonment. It's the moment he finally stopped lying for his son. The father pauses again, not because he's finished, but because he knows what he's about to say will sound unforgivable to anyone who hasn't lived it. When he resumes, his voice is steadier now, grounded by something that resembles clarity. In jail, he says, things were different. A ripple of discomfort moves through the room. Jail is not a word people associate with improvement. The son shifts sharply, shaking his head, already rejecting the idea before it's fully formed. But the father continues. For the first time in his life, there were rules that didn't bend, he explains. Consequences that couldn't be talked away. A schedule that didn't care how he felt that day. He described structure, not punishment but order. Wake-up times. Responsibilities. Limits that applied to everyone equally. There were no parents to guilt, no bosses to charm, no systems to blame. Just expectations enforced consistently. And for the first time, the father says, he had to face himself. The courtroom is silent now, listening intently. He explains that outside those walls, his son had always found a way out. A lie convincing enough. A story emotional enough. Someone else willing to step in and clean up the damage. But inside none of that worked. Manipulation didn't earn favors. Excuses didn't erase consequences. Words alone had no power. He couldn't talk his way out, the father says quietly. And he couldn't bully his way through. The son lets out a sharp laugh, but it lacks humor. That's ridiculous, he mutters. You make it sound like prison was a vacation. The judge's gaze flicks toward him briefly, just long enough to silence him without a word. The father presses on. He got sober, he says plainly. No dramatic emphasis. No self-congratulation. Just fact. Not because we begged him to. Not because we paid for it. Because he had to. He talks about routine. About discipline. About showing up even on days when he didn't want to. About learning that actions carried weight whether he liked it or not. He admits it wasn't easy. It wasn't kind. But it was real. And when he got out, the father adds, he was calmer. Clear. For a while, he was better. That's when it hits the room. This isn't a father praising jail. It's a father admitting that it was the only environment where his son stopped running. He looks down briefly, then back up, his voice dropping to something almost painfully honest. It was the only place, he says, where he couldn't bully the world into giving him what he wanted. The words land hard. You can feel the shift, the moment when judgment flips. When the audience, once certain they were watching a cold parent abandon his child, begins to understand something far more uncomfortable. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't cruelty. It was relief. Relief that for once his son was safe from himself. Relief that the cycle paused long enough for truth to break through. Relief that consequences did what love, money, and protection never could. The son stares straight ahead now, jaw clenched, eyes dark. The confidence is gone. In its place is something raw and defensive, the look of someone realizing the narrative they controlled no longer belongs to them. And in that moment, the courtroom understands what the father meant all along. The judge doesn't respond right away. She looks down at the papers in front of her, flipping through them slowly, deliberately, as if giving the son just enough time to believe he might still regain control. Then she looks up. Sir, she says evenly, let's talk about the record. The son straightens, his expression tightening. What record? He asks quickly. The one you seem to have forgotten, the judge replies. She begins calmly, almost conversationally, reading dates out loud. Arrest dates. Not one. Not two. A pattern. Each one spaced just far enough apart to suggest opportunity, and close enough together to suggest repetition. The son shifts his weight, his jaw working as if he's chewing on a response before it's fully formed. Then come the probation violations. Missed check-ins. Failed requirements. Excuses offered. Warnings given. Chances extended. The judge notes how each violation was followed by a new explanation, and how each explanation placed responsibility somewhere else. An employer, a friend, a misunderstanding, bad advice. The son interrupts, his voice rising. That's not what happened. You don't know the full story. The judge raises a finger slightly, not to silence him yet, but to signal that she's not finished. She reminds him of what he said earlier, minutes ago, about being stable, about having turned his life around, about jail being a misunderstanding that barely mattered. Then she places those words next to the record, letting the contradiction speak for itself. You told me, she says, that this was a one-time mistake. She pauses. These documents suggest otherwise. The son's composure begins to crack. His responses come faster now, louder, layered with frustration. He deflects, claiming the system targeted him. That his father exaggerated everything. That people love to judge him based on paperwork instead of who he really is. Then his tone shifts. This is ruining my future, he says sharply, turning toward his father. You're doing this to me. You're trying to make me look bad in front of everyone. The words hang in the air, heavy with accusation. The judge doesn't hesitate. No, sir, she says firmly. He's finally telling it. The son freezes. She leans forward slightly now, her voice sharpened by clarity, not anger. She explains that accountability doesn't destroy futures, denial does. That patterns matter. That responsibility isn't proven by intention, but by behavior over time. You didn't come in here to be honest, she continues. You came in here to be believed. And those are not the same thing. The son opens his mouth, then closes it again. His face flushes. His hands clench at his sides. The confidence that once anchored him has completely dissolved, replaced by agitation and disbelief. The courtroom feels it, that collision between story and fact. Between performance and record. Between who he claims to be and what the evidence says he's done. And as the judge finishes laying out the contradictions, it becomes unmistakably clear. This case is no longer about money or even about family. It's about truth finally catching up to someone who's spent years outrunning it. Judge Judy sits back slightly, then leans forward again, her eyes locked on the son with a calm intensity that signals the shift from listening to judgment. When she speaks now, she doesn't introduce new information. She repeats his own words back to him, slowly, deliberately, so there's no room to escape them. You told me you turned your life around, she begins. You told me jail was a misunderstanding. You told me your father abandoned you when you needed him most. She pauses between each sentence, letting them settle before continuing. And yet, she says, every single time something went wrong, you blamed someone else. She dismantles the excuses one by one. The bad childhood. The lack of support. The unfair system. She explains that hardship may explain struggle, but it does not excuse repeated harm. That millions of people grow up with less and still learn accountability. That adversity is not a license to injure the people who keep catching you when you fall. This case, she says, is not about money. She lets that sink in. It's not about betrayal, she continues. And it's certainly not about revenge. Her voice sharpens, not in volume but in precision. This is about accountability. She explains that rescuing someone from consequences may feel like love in the moment, but over time it becomes something far more dangerous. It teaches entitlement. It erases responsibility. It creates a world where nothing is ever the individual's fault. She gestures lightly toward the father. You think he failed you because he stopped paying for your mistakes, she says. But what he actually did was stop lying for you. The son shifts uncomfortably, his eyes darting, his mouth tightening as if searching for a response that won't come. Judge Judy continues, her tone unwavering. Parents don't save their children by removing every obstacle, she says. They save them by teaching them how to face one. She explains that consequences exist for a reason. Not to punish, but to interrupt destructive patterns. To force reflection where excuses once lived. To protect not only society but the individual spiraling within it. You had structure in jail, she says. Rules, limits, accountability. And instead of learning from that, you came in here pretending it never mattered. Her gaze hardens. Your father didn't fail you, she says clearly. He stopped lying for you. The words land with finality. The courtroom is silent, not stunned, not shocked, but settled. As if something unresolved has finally found its place. The son stares forward, his earlier indignation replaced by a blank, brittle stillness. There's no argument left to make. No narrative left to control. Judge Judy straightens, her authority fully reasserted. This court does not reward manipulation, she says. And it does not punish honesty, no matter how uncomfortable that honesty may be. In that moment, it's clear why this exchange will be remembered. Not because of shouting. Not because of spectacle. But because of the unmistakable clarity with which illusion was stripped away, leaving only truth behind. Judge Judy doesn't deliberate for long. By the time she reaches for her pen, the outcome feels inevitable. Not because of sympathy, but because the facts have finally been allowed to stand without distortion. This case is dismissed, she says firmly. The words echo louder than expected. She rules in favor of the father, making it clear that no money is owed, no reimbursement required, no obligation left unmet. What was presented as a financial dispute has revealed itself as something else entirely, and the court will not be used to pressure a parent into resuming a cycle of damage. The son stiffens. His face flushes, anger flickering just beneath the surface, but he doesn't speak. He can't. There's nothing left to argue. No excuse left unchallenged. No leverage left to pull. Judge Judy looks directly at him now, her tone calm but unyielding. You should understand something, she says. If you continue down this path, blaming everyone else, refusing responsibility, your next stop won't be this courtroom. She pauses just long enough for the warning to settle. This court is the last place before consequences get much harder. The father exhales quietly, the tension he's been holding finally releasing. He doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. But there's a visible sense of relief in his posture, as if being believed mattered more than winning ever could. For the first time since the case began, his shoulders lift slightly, no longer bracing for impact. Around the courtroom there's no applause, no whispers, no commentary. Just a stunned, respectful quiet. A few heads nod subtly, not in judgment but in recognition. People understand what they just witnessed. Not punishment. Not cruelty. A boundary finally held. The son gathers his papers abruptly, jaw clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. He doesn't look at his father. He doesn't look at the judge. He turns and walks out without a word, anger radiating from his silence. The image he brought into the courtroom, controlled, confident, untouchable, has been stripped away, leaving exposure in its place. Judge Judy calls the next case, her voice returning to its steady rhythm, but the weight of what just happened lingers. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a reckoning. A father validated for choosing truth over protection. A son confronted with consequences he can no longer outrun. And a courtroom reminded that sometimes, the hardest kind of love is the one that finally says no. As the courtroom settles and the tension begins to ease, the father remains standing for a moment, as if unsure whether he should speak at all. His hands rest on the edge of the podium, fingers worn and steady now, no longer gripping out of fear. He looks toward the bench one last time, not to argue, not to defend himself, but to be understood. I love my son, he says quietly. The words come without hesitation. I love him enough to stop saving him. There's no bitterness in his voice. No resentment. Just a simple, painful truth spoken by someone who's reached the end of what protection can do. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't justify. He doesn't ask for approval. The sentence stands on its own, complete and heavy. For the first time since the case began, Judge Judy's expression softens. Not into sentimentality, not into sympathy that excuses behavior, but into something more human. She gives a small nod, the kind reserved for moments when the law intersects with real life in a way that leaves no clean edges. Good luck to both of you, she says quietly. The courtroom goes still. No murmurs. No movement. Just a shared silence that acknowledges what has been lost, and what might still be saved. The father lowers his gaze, breathing out slowly as if letting go of years of guilt in a single exhale. Then the moment passes. The bailiff prepares the next case. The rhythm of the courtroom resumes. But for everyone who witnessed it, something lingers. Not judgment. Not outrage. Understanding. Because what they saw wasn't a father giving up on his child. It was a father choosing the only kind of love that had any chance of reaching him at all. Sometimes love doesn't look like comfort. Sometimes it doesn't sound gentle or feel reassuring. Sometimes love looks like saying no. What unfolded in that courtroom wasn't cruelty. It was a line finally drawn after years of rescue had failed. A father didn't turn his back on his son. He stopped shielding him from consequences that were slowly destroying him. And in doing so, he forced a truth into the open that no amount of money, excuses, or second chances could erase. But that truth isn't easy. Was the father right to stop helping his son, even knowing it would make him angry? Or did he go too far, choosing principle over unconditional support? That's the question this case leaves behind, and it's one only you can answer. Because accountability saves some people. And for others, it feels like abandonment. If you believe responsibility matters, if you believe consequences can change lives, tap the like button so more people see stories like this. And if you want more real courtroom stories where honesty collides with entitlement, make sure you subscribe. These are the moments that don't just decide cases, they reveal character.